resurrection as this mighty, huge power that rolled away a stone. But this image that I took on the labyrinth of Ava's candle on Friday night, I think is a little bit more appropriate when we consider what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about the power of resurrection. And it seems to me that what we are talking about is that empower or that empowerment that rises within us and among us to protect the light. And some days that light needs more protection than others. And certainly throughout this last year, we have all probably felt like that candle, fragile and weary and afraid that our light might be extinguished in all of the challenges of this season. But the Easter narrative and archetype reminds us that alone and together, we can protect the light in ourselves and in one another. So let me read to you. I've chosen to read from the Gospel of John, John's recollection of this day. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord. I do not know where they have laid him." She turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, but go to my brothers." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." So my first question for this morning is, what does resurrection look like? Here is one image, and keep in mind, and I should have written down the artist, but I didn't. Keep in mind that our images will always look like we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, right? So this is an image from the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance. So don't these folk just look like good Italian Renaissance folk? But I love this image, and I think it's one that we need to add to our collection. Let me keep going. This, I think, is the classic image that we were all raised with. And I actually won't even go into all the reasons why I don't think this image is helpful. Those of you who've been hanging around St. Andrews for a while will know that I think this image of resurrection coming out of the Eastern Church is much more powerful. And I'll just say a few words about it for those of you who haven't seen it before, because there is so much power in this image. So for the Eastern Church, there is not so much this is a one-man show resurrection like the previous image. Everything's about Jesus, right? Alone on this day, being some sort of cosmic hero. It's that this doesn't quite capture, I think, what is at the heart of the archetype of resurrection. So here we have an image of Jesus reaching into the tomb and in fact pulling out the entire creation. So this is a cosmic event. It is not just a one-man show. And I want to share with you who in these Eastern Orthodox images, there are 6 people who are always in the picture. So, right, the people that I like the way he's kind of yanking them out of the tomb. Like it's not a gentle. There are some of these images that Jesus kind of reaches out very tenderly to kind of pull people out. And I think, yeah, that's not what resurrection is about. Most people need to be yanked out. And so this is Adam and Eve that Jesus is yanking out. And who are Adam and Eve? Well, really, Adam and Eve are the archetypes of everyone. So basically everyone gets to be part of this resurrection, or there is no real resurrection. If you look on the screen to the right, you have two figures, one in green and gold carrying a shepherd's hook. That is Abel. You will recall that Abel is the first martyr within the Hebrew testimony, right? So the family of that archetypal family, Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, yeah, they weren't really leave it to beaver, that family, were they? Like, it was a troublesome family. So how did the narrative end? Cain kills Abel. So we have the first, within the biblical tradition, the one who is also a symbol of innocent suffering at the hands of who? His brother. Wow, another classic human story. And right behind him is Stephen, who was the first martyr of the early church. Once again, someone else suffering innocently at the hands of a brother. And behind Abel and Stephen are David, actually they may be on the left, but King David and Solomon. And I love the inclusion of these two in all of the images. Why? Because David, at some level, Israel's favorite son, is also Israel's greatest betrayer. And so what does this say to us? It says that it's not just the good folk that get to be part of the resurrection. It's everybody. So just to remind you, David starts out as this young boy hero who kills Goliath, and very much a symbol of Israel, like the little guy who's always going up against the big guy, and the hope is that David will prevail, right? That's always the hope. And so David then is elevated to king of Israel, and then suddenly he isn't this lovely shepherd boy looking out for everyone anymore. Suddenly he's the king who sees his top general's wife bathing on the roof and says, ooh, I want her. So he, sends for Bathsheba, who has no choice in the matter, sleeps with her, and lo and behold, Bathsheba becomes pregnant. And suddenly David's going, oops, we've got to fix this. So he sends for Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, who's fighting Israel's battle in the front lines, brings him back and says, I think you need a break. Please go sleep with your wife. And Uriah goes, oh no, my faithfulness is to king and country. I'm not going anywhere near my wife. And so David, in the big cover up, or Uriah goes back to the front lines, and David arranges for him to die. And yet, here we are in this image. David is yanked out of the tomb as well. So this sense that both our finest selves and our worst selves and every piece of creation need to be part of this resurrection event. And certainly at the end of this year, I would cling to that vision yet again, that suddenly the Davids of this world are rising like crazy. And I'd like them all to be beheaded, but that isn't actually at the heart of what will bring healing. So let's go to another image. Wendell Berry says, and he's a Catholic priest who I think died earlier in this century and wrote until he was 90. And even at the end of the 20th century, he was saying, it is time for a new story, a universe story. And he says, healing is impossible in loneliness. It is the opposite of loneliness. To be healed, we must come with all the other creatures to the feast of creation. So I would say that this image actually goes even further than the image from the Eastern Orthodox Church. So we can no longer think of the human race as being the center of planetary life, and therefore the center of resurrection. What I love about this image is that there's this beautiful dance between humanity and the natural world, and in fact, no separation in this image. And so as we continue to sow seeds for how we might be vehicles of resurrection, this, I think, is the icon for the 21st century. we either rise together, we dance together, or we will be hopeless together. So I'm going to return to this image. And I'm going to share with you some words by Kathleen Asbo as she thinks about those words in the Gospel of John that Jesus speaks to Mary. So there's this sense, and I think when you listen to her poetry, you'll understand how powerful those words are for us every day. So when Mary recognizes that Jesus has somehow been revealed to her or returned to her again, her first instinct is to reach out, touch, grasp, hold on. And yet he says to her, do not cling to me. And so Kathleen Asbo wrote this prayer or this poem a year ago when the world first went into lockdown. And the wisdom of these words ring true even more a year later. And so I'm going to share them with you, and then I'm going to invite you into a time of personal contemplation. Noli me tangere, do not cling. Now we are in a time of not touching. And in this new world, our difficult lesson is to let go. To stop clinging to the forms we have known, and to see with new eyes the possibilities of life that appear before us in ways we could not have imagined. This thorny crown has been our road to Calvary. We have wept and walked together. Now we wake this Easter morn on a tremulous threshold. Now we must all become gardeners, planting the seeds of hope, tending the shoots of tenderness, gathering and gifting the fruits of generosity with which to feed our aching world. If we open our hearts, we will hear our true names spoken with the voice of love. Go forth and share this good news. A new Eden awaits. Will you eat of the tree of life? During this time for contemplation, I invite you to consider which of these icons speaks to your understanding of resurrection power. And then I invite you to consider what gifts you bring to this common cosmic invitation to rise again in communion with one another and all that is alive in the planet, so that together we might be symbols of light and life, and together we might protect, love, life, and light.